And we've had obviously got lots of questions and comments coming through, and followed on this point. I think it's a really good one from one of our attendees, Brian Bob Jones, who has asked the question. So there's a term here in the UK called Black and minority ethnic, which is effectively an umbrella term for ethnic minorities, or using the term ethnic minorities or people of color. Is it a problem that we have these labels where we're trying to put all the ethnicities together, which is why the Black movement has been left behind? Sandra?
I don't think so. What we are seeing, and quite frankly, what people see is black and brown. And they see that black and brown skin. And rarely, I think, do they come up to you and ask you, so what group do you come from? They don't ask that question. All they see is the skin color. And that's the unfortunate part to this whole story, is that you have judged me. And as they say, my tribe, you have judged me just by my skin color. And that is the way in which people identify different groups, but they just put it all under one umbrella. But I don't know if that's really the part that we need to be as concerned about, as we should be thinking about why people hate. Why? Why is that difference there like that? Getting to the root of hatred and where it began. And of course, it's different in different countries.
Yeah.
We definitely should be understanding, why do we get to hate just because that person's skin is different?
Well, also it's that systemic racism that people aren't really taught about or understand, and trying to also, I think racism, or even talking about race in business, is such an uncomfortable conversation, both sides of the pond. And we need to the expression, we need to afflict the comfortable, and the afflicted need to be comfortable. And no, sorry, the afflicted discomfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Yes.
I can't get my statements out, but you know what I mean. And this is part of the problem. Like, how do you even navigate the minefield of the language of race in business? Where do you even start?
Yeah,
like
terminology. I'm sorry, Suk. What I was going to say, first of all, I do think when you talk about people of color or BAME, that you're lumping everybody together, and there are unique experiences by group, and even as you measure success and progress, you know, you don't want for one group to sort of move the needle on a joint group that doesn't, like, you're not looking at each individual group. So I, do prefer to look at each strand of diversity as a singular strand. And I think, to Sandra's point, though, unfortunately, when you get to skin color, and the darker the skin, the more assumptions that tend to be made. And that gets into even some of the language that we use, right, where we start to talk about unconscious bias, right? And that has been more of the language of corporate America dealing with what now we're prepared to call systematic racism. I think, of course, unconscious bias is real. Everybody has it. That has a part to play. Of course, microaggressions are real, often fueled by unconscious bias, and, again, has its impact on individuals. But I think that when you think about it, without acknowledging systematic racism, it's very difficult to deal with. And that's not really a language that we've used in the corporate atmosphere until today. And when you think about organizations that are, over 100 years old, right? And what was built into the floorboards at that time, right? There's no denying it. And I think when we think about race, and specifically the challenge for Black people, is the history of slavery, and unlike any other history, and certainly in the Americas, when you talk about immigration and who came to the Americas and how, there's one group that came unwillingly and built much of this country with no recognition. And even once slavery was over, nothing to build upon, but destruction. And even this Friday, we'll celebrate Juneteenth. And even people who weren't made aware of their freedom for, years. So that's a legacy that leaves, people like to think that that was so long ago.
Yeah.
But even real, Jim Crow laws and segregation is not that long ago. And so the lasting effect of what seems like ancient history is still alive and well.
And I think with the if I may, with
the
BAM and the Black and the people of color in the United States and the BAM in UK, I think it's a safety net, right? It's a safety net because it allows you to have a one size fits all, and it allows, organizations, government to say, we're going to actually do an intervention, but we're going to actually take the least and most discomfort, the least action that will actually have the benefit of all, and which quite frankly we've seen, and especially as a D&I practitioner, is that those interventions you take often don't impact or really move the needle with Blacks or African American, right? So you see that if you have a people of color and you track them, and especially in industries such as a healthcare industry, you have a lot of those numbers that come from Asians, people that are not Black, and so that you actually get a dilution of systematic interventions and policies to progress them. And I think we have to get comfortable saying that, yes, there is a unique experience. We need to look at all people of color. However, recognize that the barriers and obstacles are different, and that we have to be thoughtful and specific around addressing those barriers and obstacles, and also looking at how do we support the communities that we're in to address them through education, through accessibility, through opportunities. So it can't not just, really be people of color and BAM, we're going to do these things, because we know that their challenges differ so much that you could inadvertently continue and perpetuate the inequality, because you're not addressing the specific and very targeted issues within those communities. And so I do think it has to be looked at in totality, but also really broken down so that you can really look at the unique transgression. And then also, what is the balance? What is happening in the educational system, in the college, the pipeline, in what are the movement within the organization that is helping or hindering, because lack of sponsors, lack of mentors. So you really have to look at it holistically in an integrative way, so that you can truly support and have actions that really drive progress.
So what are we've got lots of attendees on this right now. What are some of the granular kind of actions that they can be taking to help the Black community when it comes to things like representation, promotion, processes, etc., particularly things around allyship, because all non-Black people need to be better allies to the Black community. One of the best examples I read about recently was the co-founder of Reddit, who stepped down from the board to give his seat to a Black person. I mean, I can't think of anything more powerful as an ally to actually give your seat to someone else. So I really want to hear some tangible, granular examples of what we could do. Sandra, did you want to start?
It actually does have to start from the top down and bottom up, because you cannot leave this with just the middle, because the middle is sometimes more the problem. So it is helping people on a granular level understand, first of all, what is an ally? Because we have talked about allies before. An ally is definitely not a verb. It is really, it is a verb, but it is to be put into action. And I think during this time, because of people who are somewhat waking up, they're realizing that they have been contributing by their silence. And that's one of the pieces that I really hang on, is that you cannot be silent anymore. It has to reverberate really throughout the organization. So I am grateful for the CEO that I have, who actually steps into the box and says, no more. And he does this with his action. We did have a town hall on racism and privilege, and had the opportunity to have co-workers as well as external presenters talk about this. And the results of that tells you a story. It is about the fact that one of our white colleagues didn't know what privilege was, and he realized from that presentation that he's privileged. Realized from our Black colleagues, they wanted for the first time to hear their story real time. the things that they go through real time. So sharing this kind of information starts to open up. So how do you become an ally? Well, one is, don't call me and say what. Call me and say, this is what I'm going to do, because it does require action. It requires that we actually created an ally, a pledge, and we gave specific instructions as to the things that you can do. And it is definitely asking, how are you dealing with this situation? Because you do need to be educated. We created a resource so that people had resources that they could read books, they could look at podcasts, they can look at movies and shows on television that will start to help them understand the language and the culture of people you have just been working beside, but you just didn't know me. So really about building a trust, showing that you actually care. It's about advancing the ideas of the underrepresented in your meetings. Stand up for people who have made statements and they've been glossed over. You stand up beside them at this point and reiterate that this person has said this. There are also things of being where you create the visibility as a manager, create the visibility for that underrepresented person to have their moment to speak or to be a part of a project they didn't have before. This is about creating space for other people and committing to it in a formal way, not just talking, committing to it in a formal way. The actions definitely speak louder than words, and that's what we're asking people to do. Step up, join an organization that you are not comfortable. This is a time for you now not to be comfortable, and be a part of the solving of this issue and not just stand by. I have a list.
Yeah.
I don't want to take them all.
No, you did, and lots of resources you sent as well, which you're going to be sharing with everyone. Sandra did send me a whole list of books and TV programs and movies that you should all be watching, so we'll be sharing them afterwards. Erica, is there anything more that you'd add about granular interventions or actions that people could take?
Sure. So first of all, totally agree with Sandra. Silence is endorsement. And I say that often about most things. So people do need to speak up. It does need to start from the top. There does need to be outreach and messaging happening at, by division heads and things of that nature. And that's certainly something that, I was really pleased to see our leaders at Goldman Sachs step up. One of the things that we're doing is reverse mentoring. Yeah. I think that that's a great way to create both authentic relationships and deeper understanding of the Black experience at the firm for our senior leaders. So I do think reverse mentoring is a tool that can be leveraged within organizations. At the same time, right, we can't just make it Black people's jobs to teach, the people at the firm what it's like to be Black. We want to deepen understanding, we want to create relationships, but there's a lot of work and homework and resources available that people need to do on their own and not put the burden on the Black community to lead the organization through the crisis. Allyship is something that we are pursuing as well with, a train the trainer model that will go into the divisions and really hopefully scale. We had a pre-existing training on identity and race in the workplace that we're going to go deeper. It was a senior leadership training model that we're expanding at the company. And I think we'll reach a much broader group because very often our senior leaders get it. And, you have the difficulty of the middle manager engagement and deepening that understanding. So we felt like expanding that training would be helpful in deepening understanding in middle management.
Should we make this just to get your perspective, given the roles that you all have, should we make this race, diversity and inclusion training mandatory? Should employees have to go through it? Because a lot of the time it's voluntary and then you don't get the right people in the room. I'm very interested to get your perspective on that.
We take a targeted approach of certain education for a certain level, and certainly we have the goal of 100% completion. I think whether or not you call it mandatory or not, you're really driving towards, KPIs, and we do set KPIs. And in general, I think at companies where, that which gets measured gets done. Absolutely. So even one of the tangible things around setting goals, whether or not it's hiring goals, or other goals like, You know, in the UK, we have, whether or not it's, you know, the Women in Finance Charter goals, or even when there's accountability on reporting, like the Race at Work Charter. I think when you have some type of metric or accountability or need to report out, it creates a different environment for people, and that you get greater accountability and the outcomes that you're looking for. So I do think KPIs are important.
What do you say?
I think,
sorry,
if I can, Suki, I think in terms of having it mandatory, I think you have to create the conditions so that that mandatory training can affect change. I think if you do it as a compliance, you will not get the engagement, and it may be done in isolation, and it really will not have the impact on change behaviors, on culture, and really on the work environment. I think what we've been doing is really now opening up and having conversations similar to Sandra and Erica. You know, I had a conversation with our CEO, and, you know, we felt very strongly it was important to make a statement from Sanofi. And we're a French company, so it's even greater context because there's not a complete understanding of the dynamics and the real issue here, but there was enough of acknowledgement that it was, you know, such a big platform that was affecting our North America organizations and also having an impacting other countries. We made a statement. We called his name, George Floyd. We put Black Lives Matter. And I think the education and genuine conversations that for us as practitioners and those on the phone create a space for, then when you have that training on race, on discrimination, on equity, on inclusion, then you would actually prime the organization so that it can affect change. By doing it as a compulsory, I think you have the KPIs and you have the metrics, people going through them, but are people really bought there? Do they have the context and understanding of really why it is necessary and what you're trying to accomplish? And so what we're doing is now having these exchanges that will be internal and external, that we're going to put people, different leaders, business leaders and functions leaders together to have honest dialogue. It's not going to be scripted. It's going to allow the leaders to be vulnerable, to really show not only, you know, what we have done, but actually show the things that they have learned or may not have known. And I think that that's where we have to get more comfortable and positioning our leaders and our organizations to step out and say, this is a new space. I don't know. We don't know, but we're trying. We're going to have exchange. We're going to have dialogue. We're going to create the safe place so people don't feel that they're going to be judged or blamed when they say something that may not be prime and politically correct, but so that they can learn and understand how this will help us build a more inclusive, collaborative, respectful, fair, and equitable work environment. And I think doing that, when you have these types of trainings, it hits differently. And you actually will see the systemic changes that obviously all of us are really trying to drive.
How can we we all know that representation of the Black community, both sides of the pond, is woeful at the top. How can companies be more bold in improving that representation? Because I'm sure you all saw, obviously companies making lots of statements, Nike saying, you know, don't do it, the statement for Black Lives Matter, but then quite rightly pointed out on social media, someone posted a photo of their exec leadership team and not any Black representation in their leadership team, which even I was surprised at, given what they do and who they represent, who they sponsor, the athletes, etc. So how can companies be more bold? Because you keep hearing from people the excuses, oh, you know, the Black talent just isn't there and it's really hard to find them. We get it all the time in Audelis. The excuse is to not do diversity hiring because you're compromising on quality, blah, blah, blah. What can companies do?
Be bold. Be bold.
Yeah.
You recognize what you don't have and go out there and you change the face of your board. You change the face of your leadership team. You can just be bold. It does not take rocket science to do this. David Kenny started at Nielsen a year and a half ago. He has changed the board membership. He has changed the leadership level. And I do say that you have to do two things with it when we talked about mandatory or not mandatory. If you don't change your leadership in terms of how they view diversity and inclusion, then you know you're on a trip that's going to take a long time. But if you have your leadership that understands what has to take place, and I, as long as I've been doing this, I still do not understand why you don't understand this actually does affect your bottom line.
Yeah.
It does affect your bottom line. And to help them get there, I do think at leadership level, it should be mandatory because they're learning like anybody else. And those who follow them emulate them. They know that their success is dependent on that. And so if you can get them to the table to learn, and it is about learning. Nobody is perfect in this. David isn't perfect. He falls down, he gets back up. Everybody falls down again, including me. We fall down because I don't know everything about diversity and inclusion, and I've been doing it as long as I have. You keep learning.
Yeah.
Open yourself to that.
Because I suppose like seeing what the co-founder of Reddit did by stepping down, I mean, that is an incredibly powerful thing that he did. Why could you also not just add a seat to the board? Why would that be such a big issue to deal with? Or if you're looking at the C-suite, is there not a way of doing some organization design where you can maybe even add a seat in the C-suite and then promote talent at the level below? But if you don't have that ethnicity at the level below, then hire it in. Our companies, what's stopping them from doing that? What are the obstacles inside that is making like some of these CEOs think, no, I can't do that? Erica.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the exact answer for every company, right, Suki? But I mean, for some boards, right, there's a certain number of seats in the bylaws, and all of that would have to be changed. And even, you know, depending on what country you're talking about, there are or are not term limits in terms of how quickly the board can turn over, and you can even make progress around that. I also think you have to be careful about adding a seat or creating a role, because you want it to be a real role, right? And people who are really good and really smart and really successful where they are, they don't want to join just to have a made up role, right? You know, or a role that somebody's going to say, oh, that's the Black role that was added to the management.
It's too tokenistic almost.
You know, I'm sorry?
It's too tokenistic. Approach.
So you really want to be careful about that. And that's why, you know, I've been quoted before saying diversity is disruptive, right? Because you do have like long-standing sort of succession plans and people that are lined up for leadership roles. And if you're not really intentional, and if you don't figure out a way how to insert certain diversity in those leadership pipelines and think very carefully around succession and look at the diversity of your succession plans and figure out, even if there's not somebody internal, is there somebody external, right? You know, and this will vary by company, will vary by culture and how those pipelines are developed. And, you know, when you look at leadership, where they come from, and you have to figure out what's going to work. I've worked at a few firms in diversity roles now, and there's not a one size fits all. You really have to understand corporate culture and what that pipeline, the leadership has been, how long-standing, where do leaders come from, you know, what parts of the business are most likely to ascend to the top, how are you strategic about that, right? Because you could have great diversity in another area of the business of super smart, successful people, but if that's not the, you know, sort of the platform and the seats that lead to the C-suite, you may not necessarily achieve that. Or is that what you have to disrupt, right? You know, so there's not a one size fits all answer, which is why you have to engage in the dialogue. And you do need diverse perspectives at the senior most levels, including coming from the board. If the board isn't asking the question, then, you know, the C-suite probably is not trying to figure out the answer. So, you know, and if you don't have a CEO, obviously we're on this panel and largely because of the leadership that we serve, and, you know, so we have something to talk about, but that still doesn't make it easy, right? And it has to be intentional at every level, and you have to be planful out, you know, it doesn't just happen in 1 year, all of a sudden you have a diverse management committee.
Absolutely. I mean,
I also think what's very important in that, and we have to do consistently as practitioners, is really challenge the prototype and the image of what leadership looks like and what good looks like. And this is what I've been doing, and said, why? You know, don't look at getting a photocopy or an exact replica of what you had. Look at what are the skills and the attributes and the talents and abilities that will complement what you have. Look at what your strategic imperatives and plan is going to be 3 to 5 years from now, because all of us can say in 3 to 5 years, we probably have an area of a market we're trying to do an expansion. And so using that as a way to challenge those. I agree with Erica wholeheartedly. I don't think adding a board or a seat is the right thing, because you completely will have it, have people put in a position where their success is undermined. But I do think when you have those openings, challenge the leadership, challenge the dialogue to think about what are the complementary skills that now you have the opportunity to include on your XCOM, to include on your board. That may be a gap, but someone that with different background, perspective, experience, and diversity can bring that you haven't had. And really, to Sandra's point earlier, treat it as you would treat any business intervention, right? Like, you want to make sure that you're growing, you're getting the insights, you're actually expanding. And I think that that's a platform that is kind of basic, but quite frankly, could be quite transformational if you do this in a consistent way and hold accountability for that.
I mean, this has honestly been a phenomenal conversation. The hour's pretty much almost up. We've had hundreds of comments and questions. There is no way we'll be able to go through it. Sujatha Savar has very, very positively asked that we need to have a follow-up discussion. So I'm going to try and get you to all commit to another date in the next month or so, and we'll try and get another 1,000 people registered to tune in. Is there anything, what's your last kind of sentence or statement that you'd make? Because we kind of want to inspire these individuals to go away and actually do something. Like, how can we give them hope that things are going to change? Sandra, what would you say to them?
I would say first to understand the walk of someone else's journey, to have empathy for that, to understand it. But I would also ask you to be more educated about the history of where this has come from, so that we can eradicate it and move it along. We do not need this in our lives. And I in my job, I really do look at this as most people do not have bad intent. They don't. And we can help this by changing what the impact is by the intentions that we have. So as we go into these rooms in our meetings, support the people who are sitting in those rooms with you. Show that you support. And that is by your actions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandra. Wayma, what would you say?
I would say be courageous and be challenging. Be the one that's going to say, question, and call the behavior out on the table. And I think that courage has to be one for your own self, not allowing yourself to feel that you have to be silent because you want to comfort others around you, but recognizing that not being silent, being courageous, actually can facilitate the growth, the insights, and really the transformation that others around you will have. And that's what I've had to do, being outside of my comfort zone in another country, in another culture, not knowing the rules and saying, if not me, then who?
Yeah.
And I have to get out of my own comfort to help the growth, the development, and the transformation of others. And so I would just encourage all to be courageous and just ask yourself, if not me, then who?
Absolutely. Fantastic. And Erica?
So hard to come behind these two amazing women, everything that they said. And I think diversity and inclusion, creating a more diverse and inclusive organization, is everybody's role. It's not just the D&I teams. Our teams will never be big enough to do the work that needs to be done throughout our industries and our organizations. Leaders need to lead from the front. Managers need to manage inclusively. Organizations need to set some goals and achieve them. Everybody should view D&I as part of their role, not extracurricular, and not just the diverse people advocating for diversity. The concept of allyship is so powerful. The concept of being an upstander, right, which is really calling out that bad behavior, is so important. Don't let things pass. How you call people out, when you call people out, how you create the safe environment to have the understanding, how you enable people to understand the lived experiences of their people. That's all the work that we all have to do. And I know there's a lot of, human capital management professionals on this call. HCM is the front lines. right? And so we should consider ourselves the front lines, but it's everybody's job. And we need to speak truth to power. We need to challenge our leaders, especially, you know, HCM professionals should not just be yes people. We need to challenge our leaders, challenge our organizations. And really, if we don't make progress now, we can all take our balls and go home.
Agreed. When will it ever, if it's not now, someone described it as Sandy Okoro at the World Bank. She described it as this moral moment for change. And I have to completely agree.
Absolutely.
Hence, if not now, when? Honestly, this has been such an amazing conversation. It's all recorded. We'll be sharing it afterwards with everyone that attended so people can learn from it after today. I mean, some of the things that I heard that I thought were fantastic, things around consciously caring, I think is critical. No more silence. So speaking up when you see racism or prejudice, and be bold and be intentional. That's some of the key messages that have come through, but then there have been so many more. We're really excited that you all know that we do the Empower role model, ethnic minority role model list, and they're coming out on Thursday because we feel that we need some good news in the world about ethnicity and role models. And there are some amazing Black leaders and future leaders and executives in those lists. So please watch out for those. They'll be published by Yahoo Finance globally on Thursday. And we have an inclusive recruitment webinar hosted by Felicity Hassan, who's our US Managing Director in New York. 30 minutes of your time. It's simple, it's free. You can join, share the link, register, watch, learn, take action. All at least, I'm just sorry that you don't have an actual physical audience to give you a huge round of applause. It's only going to be me that people hear, but a huge thank you to our incredible panel, Erica, Sandra, Wayma. Thank you so much for giving your time and your opinions. And I think there's an appetite to do this again if you have time. So no doubt I'll be in touch soon. And I obviously won't allow you to say no. And we will definitely keep in touch. And I stand by you. We all do in our business globally, and we want to support you. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All of you.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you, Sandra, Erica. It's been a wonderful experience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayma.
So good.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.